Hello everybody! Are you ready for a video that's way too long? So let's recap. Shadow of Mordor was a game produced by Monolith, the same company that made Shogo Armor Division, a weeb game in the truest sense. That is, it is not Japanese, however, it has an intro pulled straight out of their cartoons, Japanese language and all. It's a first-person shooter that features Macross-style mecha robots that you can swap in and out of vehicle mode in. You know what I thought about Shogo? I loved it! You can buy it right now on GOG. I wouldn't buy it on Steam. Look at the Steam reviews. GOG's the place to buy it. Anyway, that was before they were acquired by Warner Brothers. Since then, they went on to make The Matrix Online, an MMORPG I didn't care about. Fear, a game that was initially very impressive until you realized that you were a super soldier, you had bullet time, and nothing in the game was actually scary because it was all pre-scripted bullshit, at least until the end when, things could actually kill you. They went on to make Fear 2, which was even more bullshit than Fear 1. And then they almost caught on to greatness with a game called Gotham City Imposters, where you got to pick Team Batman or Team Joker, and you pretty much just went around killing other people in deathmatch. I played more of that game than I should have. Anyway, fast forward to 2014 when they released Shadow of Mordor. Shadow of Mordor, in its truest sense, is taking a bastardization of Tolkien's lore. It is complete and utter garbage storytelling. And people continuously say, well, Tolkien must be spinning in his grave. Probably. But it doesn't really matter because, once you realize it's a bastardization and the story doesn't matter, that's when it actually gets fun. The game is Arkham Asylum meets Assassin's Creed. But it's done in a medieval world with orcs. Or Uruks, as they like to call them. They make a strong point of calling them Uruks in the beginning, and then from that point on, they interchange the word orc and Uruk as much as they want. Either way, the storyline, again, was just really badly done. And some people would go as far to say that it actually runs contrary to pretty much everything Tolkien's literature stood for. But I don't care because this game has this glorious thing called the Nemesis system. In Shadow of Mordor, you're playing as a wraith, a guy who is trapped between life and death. So while other games would have this big game over screen when you're killed, Shadow of Mordor just simply put you back at a respawn spot. And the storyline continued. Your character is aware they were killed, and the person who killed you, if they were a lowly orc soldier, that lowly orc soldier just got promoted. He levels up, he gets stronger. As the game progresses, the enemies who kill you just keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Well, eventually, you reach a point where you start killing them. The problem is, if you don't kill them in a very specific way, they have a tendency to come back. Maybe they have some scars on their faces, maybe you put an eye out on them, maybe you chopped off one of their arms, maybe they have a hook for an arm. The point is, Shadow of Mordor brought these people back again and again and again for revenge. This was the Nemesis system. This is what made the Arkham Asylum Assassin's Creed in a pseudo-bastardized Lord of the Rings universe work. And work well. I suspect, however, that it doesn't really need to be Shadow of Mordor. It doesn't need to be Lord of the Rings. They could have taken this system and applied it to Warhammer or pretty much any other game universe and just made a plot contrivance that, again, you are some kind of wraith or bound thing. In Dungeons & Dragons, they could tie it to the Reaper's Relic, something they touched upon in the Forgotten Realms. My point here is that with a proper plot contrivance, you could throw Shadow of War in any other universe and it would probably work. So the plot of Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, simply put, is kill the orcs and eventually take over the orcish tribes and turn them against their original leaders. Shadow of Mordor had two main zones. They had the regular Mordor and then the southern region, which was green and lush and beautiful. And that's pretty much between those two zones. That was the entirety of Shadow of Mordor. Now we have the sequel, Shadow of War. And before I get into the real review of this, I need to explain a few things. First of all, Shadow of War is an amazing game, but you can tell the developers were forced to do certain things, and the actual game design doesn't support those things that they did. And when asked about the loot boxes and the DLC practices and all of this stuff, which is very anti-consumer, the developer was like, well, why are you only asking us about this stuff? Why do you only want to talk about this? Why can't we talk about the game? And what they don't realize is loot boxes in a full-priced $60 single-player game is a big deal. Gating two of the major factions behind an extra $20 on top of the $60 price tag is a big deal. And gating the true ending of the game on the $100 edition, that is the $99.99 edition of the game, that's just damn right despicable. Jim Sterling, Angry Joe, a bunch of other people reported on the loot boxes already, but I want to show you this picture. This picture is the orc, the original. Yes, they did change him later. They made the nose smaller, and they got rid of the rubbing hands motion. Now he just looks kind of sad. But they fixed it because the original version of him went along with this anti-Semitic meme where, you know, this is a Jew and he wants your money, which, you know, I don't necessarily agree with it, but it exists. That's what it represented. And someone realized, oops, and they changed it. We're going to get back to the point that they changed this, but first, let's talk about Shadow of War, about the actual game, and then I'll get back into the problems with it. So, Shadow of War is literally Shadow of Mordor 2. Everything in Shadow of War is just a better version of Shadow of Mordor. Now, I'm playing on the hardest difficulty, Nemesis, and I can say right now that the game is not balanced, at least on Nemesis difficulty, around the loot boxes. I feel that if loot boxes were actually used, that the game could be trivialized. And that is very, very unfortunate. Now, as I said, the storyline of Shadow of Mordor wasn't very good, and the storyline of Shadow of War is even worse. And literally any minor thoughts you could have had where there was some kind of suspension of disbelief where you could say, oh, it still is Lord of the Rings. No, this isn't Lord of the Rings. You see, the Elf Lord's spirit that is possessing the ranger you play as, he goes and crafts another One Ring. He pours his spirit into it, and then it gets stolen from him. And who gets it? None other than Shelob, the big, scary, awesome spider from The Lord of the Rings. Except Shelob takes the form of a woman. And by a woman, I'm talking about Morgan from Dragon Age. Because we can't have a main character that is a spider creature. No. We need to make her a big, sexy woman. And therefore, people will actually, like it. Shelob's a big, sexy woman, and she gives you visions, and those visions guide you back to Gondor, where the orcs are invading, and you have to help Gondor survive. Spoilers? You fail. You fail so spectacularly that the whole world opens up to you, and there are several areas to choose from, as opposed to just the one city in Gondor. No more are just those 2 zones that you played in Shadow of Mordor. Now there are tons. Each area has its own hierarchy of orcs, and starting in the 2nd chapter, when you get your ring back, you're able to start dominating orcs. Why am I comfortable spoiling that much of the game? Because it's only the beginning. That's why. And dominating the orcs is a core part of the game, but it's locked off to you in what took me about, I would say, 12 hours to get to. And that's because I just so well enjoyed the game for the Arkham Asylum Assassin's Creed medieval fantasy world game that this is, with the Nemesis system. Beating back my Nemesises, killing them, getting loot, that was all very satisfying. But when you get to Act 2, you get the ring back, and the ring lets you take every orc that you've life drained, and instead of having their head just explode, you dominate them, and they become yours. So you can go around dominating a bunch of lesser orcs, use them to help you take down a captain, and dominate the captain. If the captain's too high level, you can shame him, which they will actually come back to you and say, "I don't know what happened. I lost something in the battle against you and I can't get it back. Maybe if I kill you, I'll regain it," blah, 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 blah. The point is that all of these game mechanics are actually integrated into the story. Your deaths are canon to the story. Your victories are canon to the story. I literally killed a guy 4 times, and he kept coming back, with each piece I chopped off being replaced by metal until his title was completely changed to The Machine. And I think that's what this game has. It has emergent storytelling. You will literally have these stories which are very, very different to the stories other people have. And that's because the direction you go, how well you do, whether you convert certain people or don't, it will all accumulate into a different gaming experience. Peter Molyneux may have defiled the term emergent gameplay, but really, Shadow of War is all about emergent gameplay. Now, the orcs you do dominate, the captains, you can make one of them your bodyguard, summon them on command. You can get other orcs that you've dominated to conspire against certain other orcs, set up ambushes and traps for them. So you could go into a mission and have 3 of your captains, along with your bodyguard, makes 4 captains total, against 1 or 2 enemy captains. And these battles play out in an amazing way. The game's tutorial will have you infiltrating a war chief's bodyguards in order to have them betray the war chief. Then when you've killed all the war chiefs, you can begin a siege on the Overlord's fortress and claim it for your own, installing one of your orcs as the new Overlord. The game has a few other eccentricities to it, which I don't want to spoil, but I will say that the game becomes more and more fun the further in the story you go, because you unlock more powers and abilities as the story progresses. Thus, as the enemies get stronger and stronger and stronger, you get more tools to deal with them, and that's really cool. So would I recommend this game? Without spoiling it any further, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. That's before we get into the bad parts of the game, of course. The worst part of the game is it's repetitive. Now, for someone like me who enjoys grindy games like Diablo or Torchlight or Path of Exile or Warframe, these very, very grindy games, I am on board with this because I enjoy fighting the captains to fight the captains. I enjoy stealthing through bushes, trying to find ways to ambush them, getting my orcs to ambush other captains and kill them and farm them for loot. I find all of that extremely enjoyable. But I can see how to another player, they'd look at that. They'd spend maybe 9 or 10 hours on it, and say, I'm just doing the same thing over and over. I'm killing these captains. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. Sometimes I'm sneaking around. It seems repetitive and the storyline goes nowhere. Yeah, pretty much. No, the storyline does go somewhere. It's just it takes an eternity to do it. And if you are not enjoying the Nemesis system for being the Nemesis system, if sneaking around and ambushing and playing all these little events isn't fulfilling in itself, then you're not going to be fulfilled by the game as a whole. The meat of the game is the grindiness. And to a person like me, it's very entertaining. I pump the difficulty level up to maximum. That's the Nemesis difficulty. And I enjoy it a lot. But to someone who doesn't, they might just be tempted to buy loot boxes, which is really, really dumb considering the entirety of the game isn't designed for them. The game isn't balanced around it. It's clear that the developers were passionate about the game they were making, and they made the best game they could. This is Shadow of Mordor 2. It is better Shadow of Mordor, but Warner Brothers, being Warner Brothers, has piled these loot boxes on top of you. They give you vendetta missions to do in order to earn loot boxes. Once you earn a loot box, you'll be directed to the loot box store. And they do this to subject you to the temptations of purchasing some of the loot boxes. This is a mobile game system that's been built on top of what is an otherwise complete game that needs none of it. And proof, absolute proof that it needs none of it, you can decline the online data usage agreement and lock yourself out of all online activities. If you do that, you will have a blinking little market icon with a little lock next to it saying you can't access this. Now, why on earth would you want to lock yourself out of the online features of the game? Well, it turns out the game's overall EULA is pretty bad. We'll talk about the regular EULA first, then the online data usage agreement. So the regular EULA actually forbids modding of any kind. If you've watched enough of my YouTube channel, if you've watched enough of my live streams, you know I am a fanatic about modding and the modding community and the mods that are available to change up the way games work. I used to make my own mods back in Doom, Quake, Half-Life days. My point here is that the general EULA for the program forbids, in addition, by using the software, you give up the rights to issue a class action lawsuit against them. Now, thankfully, to my knowledge, keep in mind I'm not a lawyer, but to my knowledge, in certain states, such as California, you aren't actually restricted by whether you can or can't sue. But they go on to talk about arbitration and things like that anyway, because they really don't want you to sue them. And they have come to the conclusion that if you want to play their game, you can't. And then, of course, you agree that every part of the game, even the parts that were transmitted to you digitally, all of it belongs to Warner Brothers. And any of it that you could own, you forfeit to Warner Brothers. So, you know, general software bullshit. You don't actually own the game. Period. Doesn't matter if you have a physical copy. By agreeing to the EULA, you're acknowledging that Warner Brothers owns it all. So, between you not owning the game you bought, which is a common practice. It's pretty much just software law in general, but they were reaffirming it just in case there were any locations in the world where maybe you did own your games. And they pull a Nintendo, where Nintendo says that you have to settle your disputes in the District Court of Kyoto, Japan. Fox is saying you have to do it in California. At least that's what the general reading of the EULA said to me. I may have misinterpreted it at some point, and that's fine. Again, I'm not a lawyer, Here's their way of trying to get around the fact that in California and specific other places, like, arbitration agreements are not binding. They have an additional opt-out clause where you can actually choose to opt out of the arbitration agreement if you go to a specific web page providing your full legal name, complete mailing address, your phone number, and, if applicable, the username associated with your account, as well as the date you first used the game. In other words, if people are going to be able to sue them, they're going to have a list of the contact information of all the people who can sue them. It's just so ridiculous. Now, the insanity goes deeper, because that was just the EULA, the user and license agreement for using the game. No. Let's talk about the the data usage agreement real quick. So in order to play the Vendetta missions, to get free loot boxes, or buy loot boxes at the store, or do the online quote-unquote PvP. By the way, there is no PvP in this game. There is a mode by which you can play PvE against someone else's fortress that they own, and it includes their orcs that they've assigned at that fortress as defenders. Yeah, that's a way you can earn loot boxes. But it's another way to tether you to the online experience. Well, either way, if you want to take part in any of that, you have to click I agree to allow WB Games and Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment to provide personalized messages in this game based on my play experience, use my device information for analytics, and transfer my data, including my profile name, to the United States. Now, the biggest part here, if you actually read the full agreement, there is a section called monitoring, and it gives them the right to monitor not only your game, but your device information. If that means you're playing on Xbox, fine. If that means you're playing on PlayStation, fine. They can access all your data, or at least they have the legal right to. Whether they will or not is not in dispute here. I'm simply saying that as a part of this agreement, it appears to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, based on my limited understanding of the legal document, it seems like you give them the right to access all the information on your computer. Your computer's your device. Now, my problem isn't that they will do this, because I'm almost certain it's for analytics purposes, for something that I do want to get into in the future about how marketing research data is being pushed to better inform developers about market trends and how they can best manipulate you into buying loot boxes. It all goes to that purpose. I'm almost certain of it. But the fact that the legal wiggle room is there for them to take whatever information they want from your device, that bothers me a lot. Whether they will do it or not, it isn't in dispute. It's whether they can legally. I ain't giving them that right. So I left the box unchecked. My experience of Shadow of War has been strictly offline, and I've had to go over to my friends and check out his in order to see what the online hubbub was about. It's not worth it, in my opinion. But then again, we live in a world where people will say disparaging things about other people on Facebook, and they will apply their real-life name to the post, and then they get pissy when their real-life names appear online in a rebuttal. What a world we live in. But I'm going to mention this one more time. Shadow of War has so much creativity and passion put into the actual game. If you like grindy style games where you kill tons and tons of enemies, then you have these one-on-one matches between you and your rival, and your rival comes back again and again and again. You lose, you win, you just keep seeing these guys. This one guy tracked me from the newbie zone all the way across to another zone. This was not scripted. This was part of the Nemesis system happening in real time. He tracked me all across the continent. I saw how strong he was. He was an epic orc. And so what I did is I dominated him and made him my bodyguard. And in the battle against the Overlord, I lost. And as the Overlord is swinging down at me, and it goes, where you'd normally hit a button, get a quick time event, it says no chance for a revival. And instead, my bodyguard jumps in and decapitates the Overlord. We win. Because he saved my life. And so, as a thank you, I set him up as the new Overlord. Isn't that freaking awesome? This guy who tracked me all the way from the newbie zone, all the way to this brand new zone, dominated, saved my life. Now he's the new Overlord. And I'm okay with it. I thought that was amazing. Now, in full disclosure, I received the game for free. I didn't actually pay for it. And that's awesome. I think maybe if I had paid for it, I would have felt more pressure to use the online mode. But again, looking at that user in license agreement, I just said no. I can't imagine people paying $100 to get the full version of this game, which it is the full version. There are 3 versions. There's the skeleton, which is bare. It is the base game. You can enjoy the hell out of it, but you'll be missing 2 of the orc factions, which are bound to the $80 version. And then you'd be missing the true ending, aka the full DLCs, because the game story is continued in DLC, spoilers on that. You're missing out on that true ending if you don't pay the $100 for the game. And I find that absolutely despicable. And so I'm conflicted, highly recommending the game, but then on principle saying, don't get this shadow of corporate greed. But what it comes down to is the developers, the people who've already gotten paid, by the way. If they're using a standard development model, they've been paid salary to make this game already, so you're not taking money out of the developers' mouths. But the developers put their passion into this game, and it shows. The game is great, but then on the other side of it, Warner Brothers, microtransactions, tiered releases, and a EULA that is just despicable. All of it together is Shadow of War. So make your own conclusions. In fact, tell me in the comments section. I want to get a tally. How many of you tried it, liked it? How many of you are thinking of trying it despite the problems I talked about? And how many of you are just never, ever? I'm curious about this because, again, this is despicable business practices. This is Scum 101, and yet I respect the masterwork that the developers have created here. They've taken the Nemesis system, which was the only reason to play the original. They've expanded it, and they've expanded aspects of pretty much every part of gameplay from the original. There we have it. Shadow of War. It has my recommendation. Also, I'd like to mention something. Shadow of War comes with a DRM system, or at least it did upon release. I don't know if they'll remove it, but it is called De Novo. It is well thought of as a hard drive destroying monster. I've seen no evidence of this, of course, but it does seem to be fairly intensive in terms of resource usage. The thing is, De Novo has been cracked within about 24 hours of the game's release. And this was a brand new version of De Novo. I went ahead and I checked the crack, downloaded the crack, tried applying it to the full version of the game. It applied successfully. That means this this in-depth digital rights management kind of warden system that should have locked down the game and prevent piracy completely. Didn't work at all. Take a moment and think about that. And how stupid that is. How worthless that is. Now, a lot of games, such as the new Doom, have had de novo removed from their game after the game was cracked. And I'm hoping that Warner Brothers follows suit. I don't think they will, because it's very clear they are a profit first, respect second. If they cared about respect, and the respect the developers should get, they wouldn't have forced these loot boxes and tiered pricing systems with the ending being locked away behind DLC. They wouldn't have done all this. They would have allowed the art to exist for the art and been satisfied with the profits from the game itself. But when they can make money off a few whales, why not? As they say at game developer conferences these days, if you're not doing these things, you're leaving cash on the table. Warner Brothers doesn't seem like they're leaving cash on the table, that's for sure. They already got their season pass and their tiered pricing systems and their loot boxes, their microtransactions, all of it here. And you know the crazy thing about this DLC? I wouldn't have minded it if it had been a complete game first, and then they had taken the time to produce additional content afterwards. Say, okay guys, development on the game has been completed, but we're going to keep you guys on payroll for an additional 3 to 6 months in order to make these DLCs, which we are then going to sell to people. And, you know, as stupid as a season pass is, people gobble that up so they can have that as a part of their season pass. Like, I would have respected them if that's what they had done. But apparently, they took the complete game, they chopped off the ending, and, you know, the sliced bread model. We're chopping up the base game, including the, 2 out of the 4 factions, and we're going to release them to you as DLC when the game goes live. So again, I'm going to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I am, again, conflicted because I love the game, but I absolutely despise Warner Brothers now. I'm hard-pressed to find whether I despise Nintendo or Warner Brothers more, but my indignation for both of them comes from different sources. So tell me if I've convinced you to pick up the game or not pick up the game, or what, because I'm just curious. I'll probably be live streaming the rest of this game because, you know, I can sit down for 6 to 8 hour segments and just enjoy the hell out of it. I don't really have anything else to say about that. I look forward to seeing your comments. Check the links on screen for more content, and I'll see y'all next time. Oh, my. This has been a thing, hasn't it? Yeah, he's just gonna summon more ogres if I don't focus on this. Oh shit, I am dead. No chance. My bodyguard just killed him.
You're not out of the fight yet! I've made sure of that!
My bodyguard just saved me. No chance. Thank you, bodyguard. No, this bodyguard chased me from the opening zone all the way here.
Listen, you can hear the thunder of our enemies' feet as they flee.
So I converted him.
While we feast in victory, they quake in fear, because they know that we are coming for them. Witness the rise of Mordor! Witness the rise of the Bright Lord!
Yay! We still have enemy orcs here. We just own the fort, that's all. That's the funny part. I promoted him to Overlord. He's the guy who followed me. Yeah. He's terrified of flies, but I don't think he'll have to worry about flies as Overlord. So. There we go. He promoted one of them to War Chief, that's fine. Okay, we're level 30 now.